Good late Tuesday, early Wednesday meteorologist Casey Cloud here in the Weather Center right now, giving a look at the temperature across the region. I know it's a pretty late hour when we're doing this live there in the night. You see some 70s here. That's the story in most spots, is lower 70s, but there are some upper 60s around. Even 64 out toward parts of southwestern Georgia there as we're looking around that Blakely area there in Early County. But and as we're looking at my thermometer, we do have 68 here east of Stark, more rural area. Kind of tells a story. With that, I know we're still kind of, in October, we should be seeing a little bit cooler temperatures in this. Well, the storyline is maybe if you read a description there, we're expecting some cooler air, and that's going to be as we get there toward later in the weekend, early next week, as we get toward those upper 50s there for some of those lows in many spots. I mean, some spots, rural spots, definitely could see mid 50s even there as we're tracking things. So that's some exciting news. More exciting news. I know the Jacksonville Jaguars there, that football team, got that job done there Monday night against the Kansas City Chiefs there, and Patrick Mahomes. What a great job there by Trevor Lawrence and Devin Lloyd. I mean, that 99-yard interception, incredible. Trevor Lawrence on his birthday there, and literally, I mean, he fell down and then got back up and got in the end zone to beat Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid there. What a great job there by Liam Cohen. Just an incredible performance there. Again, just wow, what a game that was. The first Jacksonville Jaguar Monday Night Football win. I believe it would be on ABC on the actual network nationally, not just, on ESPN and the simulcast in a couple markets locally. The home markets, they have to when the game's on cable and the NFL broadcast it on local in the home, market there. But in the case of Jacksonville and this game against Kansas City, they hadn't won a game on national ABC Monday Night Football. It was actually on Monday night since 1999. That's kind of crazy. It was against the Denver Broncos back then, another team, as we're looking at today's division, the AFC West, and just incredible there. It's been that long. Of course, ABC didn't have Monday Night Football really on there for a while. It was more on ESPN, but it's just incredible. I know Jags did want a Saturday night game that was, kind of more Monday night on Saturday night there a couple years ago against Tennessee. It was kind of part of that package there. So on ABC is to get Jacksonville in the playoffs. So, it's something where the Jags have had some big victories, but this is up there as one of their bigger, games here. And as you're looking earlier on in the regular season, for sure. I mean, this early in the season, it's got to be up there, maybe one of the biggest games ever for Jacksonville to have won their franchise history before, the last week of the season and into the playoffs. So, what a great performance. Got to keep it up 4-1. Next game is against Seattle Sunday afternoon at 1 on Fox. And, many Fox stations anyway. Regional coverage, of course. And I know it's going to be a situation where the weather looks really nice for that. I mean, it's probably going to be nicer for that than what we had even Monday night where we had, a chance of some showers around. Luckily that, kind of decreased as we're looking. I know we had some rain on Monday around here a good bit. Right on Monday around Stark, where we're at in Bradford County. Jacksonville, they got lucky for that game time. I mean, it was clearing out by game time, most spots, but when it was. But on Sunday against Seattle, the weather looks to be, really nice, clearer skies and just, more getting into that taste of fall for sure. As we're looking towards Sunday afternoon, Trevor Lawrence going up against Sam Darnold and the Seattle Seahawks. As we go ahead, see the last 12 hours of rainfall, we did have some showers around, a little rumble of thunder here and there, but you can kind of see some of these blue areas, indicative of more precip and the lighter blue getting, upward of over an inch of rain. So it's very isolated in the last 12 hours there. We see out toward the Swanee River Valley, out toward Taylor County, parts of Alachua there as well. Alachua County, I mean, around Alachua itself even. If you kind of zoom on in here, you see some of that precip down there, just north of town. I mean, some of those areas getting a good bit stuff just out of High Springs. Some areas getting over 2 inches, but a lot of areas not getting much at all. I know we have some drought concerns we have to watch for, so we'll pay attention to that as we're looking on Homerville there, about an inch of rain north of Fargo there. We're talking about 2 inches of rain. But again, that's just the last 12 hours. But you see, some areas really lacking with that precip, Bradford, Clay, in the last 12 hours. So that's kind of the storyline there. As we look current, you don't see much in terms of that precip on the Doppler here. I know we do have to watch for development of coastal low as we look ahead. A front coming in here as well. And then I know that coastal low is going to kind of strengthen here, as it's off the coast, and really strengthen as it gets up toward maybe the Carolina coast. It's an odd scenario. We're not turning the logo red, but there's a chance in my, assessment it could become tropical or subtropical. It's tricky with the front involved there, but it could be a very strong low pressure, and we could be talking about for the Carolinas, hurricane force gust up in that direction as we're looking, later on in the weekend. The models are kind of split on it, but Hurricane Center doesn't have any chance of development for it because right now they're thinking it'd be non-tropical here in general, but there's a chance it could be tropical as we're looking at things in some ways. I know the next name on the list here is Karen, by the way. We have Jerry out there now in the Atlantic. He sent some of the models. It's expected to turn east to Puerto Rico. I'd watch it there around Puerto Rico there, as we're looking, toward parts of the U.S. and Puerto Rico. You have to be very mindful of what's going on just in case this shifts because some models want to take it further west, but right now it's going, further off toward the east. For them, that'd be Hurricane Jerry, and then maybe another Bermuda type situation where it's not too far away from there, maybe a little east, but we'll see. That could have some influence here on what develops, in a coastal low. As we look here, maybe really taking off as it gets up toward, the Carolinas. Let me say that to you better. I know this doesn't say you a whole lot sometimes when we're just looking at things like this. Let me go ahead and put on some of our model guidance. I'll get the GFS loaded on in here, and we'll take you into, let's see, Friday afternoon at 2 o'clock. So it's actually showing us some rain here, even to some degree, as we're kind of watching things. I know, even if I back it up more, it's going to show more rain. Let me do that, because I was looking at this earlier with my forecast together, and it says more precip from this early Friday around here. I know we're going to go ahead and put the model overlay on now. You already kind of see the wind arrows. We're going to have that coastal flooding concern. I know they were talking about maybe seeing some coastal flood watches, the weather service in Jacksonville. Let me see if they've done that here the last few minutes because, being on live like this, so this could update right when we're rolling. I see coastal flood advisory still, but maybe a coastal flood watches. It could escalate a little with that wind direction like that as we get toward Friday. You see some precip. Again, we have a front. That could be bring some stronger storms on Thursday. We'll see. As we're looking toward like South Georgia, but on Friday, you see some rain toward northeast Florida in the morning. But as we get later on, maybe for those football games, it'll clear out. So I have 50% for today, even I kind of think it would rain in part of it, really like around Stark, but not necessarily during football time when Bradford's taking on Newberry that Friday night in Stark. But, and I know we're watching next week for all those big homecoming forecasts for UF and Bradford, I believe. Both of them are next Friday as we're looking ahead toward, that. Next week here in the month of October. I can't believe it's already October, but as we go ahead and look, you start to see kind of a spin here as I keep going. You kind of see those winds really going in different directions according to the GFS, but maybe a hybrid type system. A coastal low could bring a lot of rain and wind there. That's just a lot of wind up there and toward, some of these red areas, getting gustier and gustier. I mean, and you see though, the organization of this low maybe off of Cape Hatteras, give or take. I know there's some vulnerabilities, along the coast. There are some houses were already in a vulnerable spot, even with, the other system we had that was way away. And this may not be tropical, but could cause more problems because it'll be right on them. Let's get to like the 12th there. The 12th, as we're looking at the calendar, would be that Sunday. So that could be an issue up there in the mid-Atlantic for sure. We'll have to watch for that. As we're tracking things here, it's again something where we're not turning logo red. It's not expected right now, according to the Hurricane Center, to have a name associated with this, but it could bring some pretty big impacts there, quite honestly, up toward the mid-Atlantic and northeast. Let me check the NFL schedule for that Sunday. I mean, I should probably check college even for Saturday, but I know, this might be a little bit closer to some of those really big cities there, I-95 corridor and the like. So as we're kind of looking at track, and I'll check the college just real quick. kind of doing this at a quick glance, just looking at the top 25 games, not seeing anything that stands out with an impact. I'm sure there probably are some games that would be impacted, but the NFL schedule, because of the I-95 corridor, and the Jets are in London. Looks like as I'm scrolling through here, maybe the Baltimore game Sunday at 1 against the Rams. They could have some issues with the weather. I know it should be pretty good for Jacksonville. Carolina, they should be kind of. Let's see the timeline on this. Yeah, that's Sunday. That's almost into Monday. Let me go ahead and back this up just a little bit. So we have that. They probably a little east of the Panthers game, I'd say, as we're looking. But yeah, that Baltimore game could have some issues there. With those, tropical-like conditions there with some gusty winds. I know Washington's Monday Night Football, the Commanders there. And by then it should start to, kind of, be moving away some. But it could still be hanging around enough to cause some issues. We'll see. But this is, later on Monday. But we'll watch that. We'll track all that here for you. It's just important to kind of keep an eye on things here. So Baltimore probably was looking at that would have the biggest impact. The Rams against the Ravens. But then the Commanders game on Monday night against Chicago, it could be some lingering impact. We'll just see because the track, whatever this is, whether it's tropical or not, still up in the air. I know Giants play Thursday night there. So that's something that is, a little bit earlier on in the timeline. So this would not be an impact because it wouldn't even probably be getting itself together yet. But again, let me go ahead and zoom back out a little bit. Again, we'll watch that there as we look again. That's interesting because that looks kind of, well, is it tropical or not? And it could be. I mean, it's not out of the question. It's just kind of getting later on in the year where it could be kind of hybrid in between. So it doesn't get the designation. It doesn't get the attention for the folks in the Mid-Atlantic, Northeast, even like Carolinas, as you type even South Carolina with some impacts. I mean, here too, sure, but, more so as we get further and further up the coast. And, just got to be careful because I want people to get caught off guard here as we're looking at, as we're tracking. So, kind of a pretty big, impactful low coastal storm up that way. Again, with some pretty high gust of wind there as we're looking in that direction. I know if this was winter, you'd be talking about maybe snow with this, but that's not what we're doing with this. Too warm generally for that. Let me put on our precip type here. We're not, I wondered if we had any on the far northern fringes. We have some snow maybe in the forecast further out west as you're looking next week there and the like. But I know, speaking of out west, I need to go back out there because there's a couple of things I want to see you guys out in that direction. See these models here. This is a hurricane out here in the Pacific that's going to try to do something out there toward maybe parts of Arizona a little bit. We see it's always kind of iffy when you're talking about stuff going across, cold waters and a good bit of land there. But, you see it doesn't even look all that organized in a way on the infrared satellite now. But you see here, maybe some of the models try to hold it together, maybe even in New Mexico. We'll see. Could cause some flooding rains if it, that would be, something that holds together a little bit more with the moisture. We'll have to watch and know. Speaking of just things being impacted by weather, not out in the Southwest, but I know the baseball game, they're Monday, not Monday night, tonight, Tuesday night, we had that Detroit and Seattle game impacted there by some rain, pushed that, a first pitch off for a while. But yeah, Arizona and New Mexico could have some flooding concerns there as we're looking on in toward the timeline, looking at some of the latest Weather Prediction Center forecast. I know watching the Outer Banks of North Carolina, around maybe areas there around the Hampton Roads here in Virginia as well, with the eastern system with the rain. But out west there in the southwest, it could be southeast Arizona, southwest New Mexico with some flooding rains. And these areas don't drain as well, so maybe around Tucson, over toward Silver City there. Maybe a little in El Paso as I'm looking here. But it starts to kind of slack off some in the forecast by then. So as we're looking, even into towards southwestern parts of Colorado, maybe kind of watching there as well. So that'll be something that they're paying attention to with some flooding concerns as we look ahead with whatever maybe is left of that hurricane in the Pacific there, that remnant moisture from Hurricane Priscilla. So I use different names over there, of course, different list, and we see some different models of different things there. But yeah, that's interesting. That GFS model wants to really take that, Axon there all the way further up with another area there, actually, which is kind of weird. In some ways, I know it's really hidden some weird stuff in some way. I think it's trying to merge some stuff together, because I know this is kind of bizarre. I didn't realize it was all different systems. It's for some reason it's trying to pin 3 different systems. I don't know if that's a glitch in the computer, to be quite honest there, but let me check on something real quick, because we don't pay attention to the Pacific all that much here in the Weather Center. But let me look here. We do have the Invest, we do have Priscilla, and we have another tropical storm, the O name, on the list out here. It's for some weird reason trying to bring all those together there. I know as we look, I need to switch the timeline on this a little bit. So yeah, that's showing that for Tuesday. So that's, let's see, so I need to go back to the 14th. Let's see here. I mean, that didn't really show it that much on this run of things. I'll back it up some more to kind of see some more moisture, though. So let me see, maybe on Columbus down that Monday there. Because that's actually a good bit of rain, for areas there in southeast Arizona. I know, as we're looking at, as we're tracking things. And I'm scrubbing back because this gets you this is overnight, Sunday into Monday. And a 6-hour period, 2 inches out there is actually, a significant flood threat, because some of these areas just don't drain well. So that's something you have to kind of watch for. Some of them might even fall in a shorter timeline than 6 hours. So it's actually kind of concerning there in parts of Arizona, because that can lead to some considerable, life-threatening flash flooding some spots. But we'll watch that here as we look ahead in the timeline. See some lightning in New Mexico right now. They had some thunderstorm warnings. The Albuquerque office issuing some of those back on that Tuesday there. So that was something to be, taking note of for sure. So giving you a look around the country with all that, important information, obviously, from, the different sides of meteorology, whether it's the tropical side, or if it's more of this, with the frontal boundary and a coastal low off toward the east, just different kind of ways to look at things. But then another side of meteorology, the severe weather side. And we had a story develop, it was back in June when it actually happened. But on Monday, the National Weather Service there in Grand Forks, North Dakota, announced that they've designated a tornado there toward a community that got hit, the Enderlin area, as an EF5, and that's the first one we've had in the country officially there in, rated that since the 2013 Moore tornado, that, disastrous one that made all the headlines. After they had the one in 99, that was the F5, and then they had the EF5 there, the enhanced Vegeta scale being used now, and, that, crossed town there 2013, and, had, dozens lose their life in that. But then in this tornado, we had 3 people lose their life there toward the Enderlin, North Dakota area. So just, incredible damage. The survey, determines 3-second wind gust estimate. So it's always, a little tricky. We don't have anemometers these places. So it's kind of, just using scientific methods here. Sometimes just looking at the damage and seeing what the engineering equates to. Sometimes they were actually using calculations, actual equations there per se, to try to determine how the tornado there caused a certain, terrain to be impacted there. So to see, just different, information was put into all that to determine it. With an EF5, it took a few months. They didn't have it as that earlier on. But, it was an odd situation because you had a heat dome toward the south, and then toward the north there is where you had all this develop. I mean, it's a Draco pattern. Ended up getting, this situation. I know looking at it there, it was, radar indicated, and it got confirmed as a significant threat about the time it was hidden there. But I'll go ahead and see that loop of this here on our other source in just 1 second. And I'll go ahead and move away from the graphics here momentarily. Let me go ahead and see the EF scale a different way. We'll go ahead and do that. on the other source. This just kind of shows it to you here without talking about a specific, rating, in general, because I mean, we've had tornadoes around Bradford County in 2020 and 2021. You have zero, threat sometimes, but we're talking about EF1 type situations, that were very impactful here in 2020 and 2021. So, anywhere on the scale can be a problem. EF2 or higher considered strong, and those are the ones that have the potential, and have in years past been a lot more, responsible for fatalities. Again, as an EF5 we had in Enderlin, North Dakota there, and it sadly caused 3 folks to lose their life. Pretty rural area, I believe. When I looked at the information, I didn't see any injuries, but 3 people losing their life. And, it's absolutely tragic there. And we have a loop now to show you of some of this. So let me go ahead and switch sources here right now. And we'll kind of pop this on in and run this through. So here you go. You can kind of see what was happening there with that rotation. Just an absolutely tragic scenario there. As we were looking in toward that area. Our area, we haven't ever obviously had anything like an EF5 here and toward, our counties, but, still very bad tornadoes that, sequenced there in 2017, Albany area, Adel area on that fateful January 21st, so, one area in the morning, the one in the afternoon, both tragic and deadly, even more fatalities in the EF5 up there in toward North Dakota. Again, we'll say that to you one more time here. Again, you see that hook? You look at the bottom, it's that area where you have that's actually a debris ball there at the bottom of that, on the bottom of the hook. So I know that's a little bit kind of hard to understand sometimes as you're looking at that, but just an absolutely tragic set of circumstances there. But let's go ahead and bring it back toward the tropics here. As we're looking and as we're tracking things, I know there definitely is a chance that more tornadoes could, in theory, get reanalyzed eventually and get up toward EF5s there. But, that's something that the scientists there at the different weather service offices will be trying to figure out. Nothing around our area, but, there's like areas of western Kentucky, that 2021 sequence there. In December, where it's so warm, we had all those fatalities around Mayfield. There was a Bremen tornado. There's some different ones in the heartland. Some of those may, or at least one of those might get upgraded eventually based on some different calculations. Sometimes they're using more than one damage indicator, to try to verify things. It just depends. Sometimes, maybe just use one here if they can really get a good handle on what happened. Try to wrap their heads around, exactly what happened, because it's all estimating based on damage. As we look here at the tropics, it's got to remain alert. It's, odd because we have that area, that coastal low that's expected going to develop. It's not going to be a big issue here. Maybe coastal flooding enhanced again, and some rain maybe early Friday, sure. And we need to watch later Thursday, early Friday here. We'll see if even backing it up some on Thursday there if we get some stronger storms in South Florida. I don't think it's out of the question there as we look and as we track things. There's the high-res modeling was going more aggressive than what some of the other modeling was showing. So it made me a little bit, interested because, and like, the further later on in the fall, spring, your severe weather setups have a front, you have a low pressure. So I don't want to be caught off guard here for starting to get a spin there on anything, just, in case we have something on Thursday. I see they're talking about the information here, the Storm Prediction Center, that additional thunderstorms will be possible across parts of the southeast with the surface cold front developing southward. Modest instability and weak cirrus will support disorganized convection, but shouldn't have too much of a severe potential, just little severe potential. But we'll be watching just in case here. Don't expect anything, really, but it's not impossible to remain alert there with that. It wouldn't be named any tropical name, when it's off our coast. I wouldn't think, that's we're getting like a PTC, potential tropical cyclone advisory situation for the Carolinas more so. but then eventually it could become Karen. It's not out of the question. Officially, though, you see it's not, see anything there off the coast of Florida highlighted for development for later on or off the Carolinas. But again, there is something, these other two, Jerry wanted to watch for Puerto Rico, Bermuda, and like some of the islands to the east there for Puerto Rico, maybe even more so in some ways based on the current track. But they're in the Bay of Campeche, pretty low chances there of development as we're looking. But we need to be careful. Just again, it's not on here, and it's odd in some ways because I just not think it's going to become tropical, so it's not on here. But it's got a little pressure of close to a hurricane there, somewhere in that range, a coastal low developing. And, it could have some gusts that are pretty strong there off the, coast there and right there along the coast. Maybe in Outer Banks of North Carolina this weekend. So that's something to kind of be mindful of here as we're looking, as we're tracking things. Again, kind of tricky, the front involved and may not really become officially a tropical entity. But we just want to remain alert here because it likely have a bigger impact here. Definitely, based on what I'm seeing right now, a bigger, impact in the continental U.S. than either of these two systems that you're seeing on this. And then even we'll have to watch in the Pacific again, as I was talking about there. Some moisture coming up from the tropics. That'd probably be, again, another bigger impact in the continental U.S. than Jerry or the other area of interest, unless we really get Jerry to get way further west, and then some models try to show the energy kind of shifting around, but not really expecting that here, in full force here at this point. But as you see here, tropical climatology, you can see here, we're starting to trail off some. I mean, we're 2 days away from that Michael anniversary on that, Friday there. So that's something that need to be mindful of, obviously, and that, just remember all the victims of that. Matthew, it's that time now, the anniversary of Matthew, 9 years ago, and just, kind of crazy to think that Matthew was already 9 years ago, all that damage there along the East Coast there, along the East Coast. It could have been worse in our area, could have been way worse, but still very impactful, obviously. It was passing on by, and we had an extreme wind warning toward the Space Coast. We had issues in Flagler County, especially as we're looking and tracking things. I know, the anniversary of the worst impacts was on that 7th. So that was on that Tuesday, but it was on a Friday then. So we just passed, that 9-year anniversary of Matthew there. The 7th was that, fateful day as you're looking here and see Flagler County. That's their worst tropical cyclone by county since 1950. If Matthew would have went just a little bit further west, we would have had a lot of the Dora counties here, Matthew counties. I mean, if it would have taken some of the tracks, some of the models were showing, if it would have rode, let's say, along, just east, even if it's east of the St. Johns River, or just, even if it just would have rode right along the beaches, you'd have had Matthew showing up for Flagler, Putnam, Clay, St. John's, Duval, Nassau, Camden for sure, and maybe even getting further west. I don't know about Bradford because it still wouldn't have taken a track from east to west, but, we got really lucky in Bradford with Matthew for sure. Folks to the east had problems. It was generally, some of them are still really bad on the beach, and it was just a sign of things to come with all the storms after. It was causing problems wherever they were heading, whether it was Irma, and then we had Ian Nicole come to mind, just, all that push there, of the water in, causing problems with docks and the like. So, still, we have not seen anything like what we could have and can see, though, with, a storm like Dora coming straight in there on the East Coast. Of course, Helene, we just passed that anniversary not too long ago, and that was devastating. The Milton anniversary, I know, it wasn't any of, our storms are, record in our covered area, but, the anniversary of Milton downstate, we're looking at that here pretty soon. As we're looking and as we're tracking things, that was a terrible, terrible thing for folks down there, that anniversary, coming on up here, obviously. We had all those tornadoes downstate with Milton and the like, as we're looking there, the 8th and the 9th there. So really, just absolutely, an awful situation. And we're looking down there toward those different areas. Yeah, I believe tomorrow would mark with the be a 9th. Yeah, because it hit on a Wednesday, I believe. So tomorrow is that 1 year anniversary of all those terrible tornadoes downstate. We had a radar stream going for that, obviously, because we had to be on all night with the landfall coverage and the local impact coverage. But, always trying to keep you guys safe and informed here in toward the weather center. So I know it's just, crazy all these different anniversaries we have here in toward the tropics as we're tracking things. But we're not seeing anything, like Matthew Milton here as we're looking in the shorter timeline. That's for sure. So as we look at this map here, we're not going to have any storms of record here, that are hidden before any of these storms in the calendar year, other than Kate, obviously, which was a later November storm. So all these others here, as we've been talking about with Matthew and Michael, those anniversaries right around now, and then Helene was a little earlier, Dora earlier, and all these others were earlier except for Kate, which again was, after, in November. It's crazy to think when Kate actually hit there, with that storyline, just absolutely, with that overall timing. It was a bizarre storm. Still be the storm of record. 40th anniversary coming up next month. Still the storm of record based on my meteorological assessment for Tallahassee, Cairo, Thomasville, Moultrie, Tifton there. So kind of telling that story for sure as we're looking at, as we're tracking all of that. I know Kate there, it was, right around, a little bit before Thanksgiving, but, it wasn't that far, ahead of it. Wasn't that far ahead of it there. As we were looking at, as we were tracking things, looks like it made landfall in Florida there. I'm trying to just check my dates. They looked through this real quick, look like later on November 21st. So when was Thanksgiving in 1985? And I look it up here. It was on the 28th, so a week later, Thanksgiving was there as we were looking, as we were tracking things, and what a terrible, terrible thing that Kate was there in 1985. Again, that 40th anniversary coming up here in about a month and a half, so you still got to pay attention to hurricane season. Kate is that prime example, even though Michael, Helene have kind of, pushed, Kate to less and less counties. If Michael and Helene were taking a little bit different track, we might have, completely taken Kate off as a summer record, but still the worst for Tallahassee. I know after the tornadoes last year, in May of, 2024 there, folks talked about it was the worst damage they had seen in a lot of neighborhoods since Kate there. If Helene would have done, what we thought it was going to do and take that track right to Tallahassee, then Kate wouldn't be on here anymore, for Leon County. But for Tallahassee's sake, it was lucky there, not lucky for further east, obviously, with that overall storm of record, Of course, that served us so bad with Michael. That's why colors on there, even though, maybe you would think, well, why didn't it start at the coast? Alberta doesn't either, but that was because of the flood, inland flood. But again, just different angles of these tracks compare rollingness. I know it's not exactly 100%. We don't have like a formula to describe this completely. This is just based on analysis. I can't really, 1950, about the furthest, with the storms go back because stuff isn't even with everything in the records, and, records get a little bit different as you look further back in the timeline, different, different types of data was taken or different descriptions of things. I know 1950 is also the first year the storms were named in the Atlantic, and still kind of crazy easy. I know that might be a little controversial because that's how bad things were with Helene and Levy and Odalia there before, for that matter. But easy caused, some areas there around Chiefland, I believe it was about 50 inches of rain, it caused that to fall there in that community. So it just looped and looped around, and I had an eye wall with it, just kind of kept going over them. The surge might have not been as bad based on what I read, but, but it's still, just so impactful. There was Hurricane Easy. It made loops and loops around there. in that area. That's crazy. But as we go ahead and continue to give you the latest here on all the information. This is our rainfall forecast weather prediction center next 7 days, saying, where the worst will be, toward North Carolina, Virginia, maybe with that coastal low. I know it's more about the wind maybe and coastal flooding than the rain in some of these spots, except from, now it's still going to be about the coastal flooding and wind in Cape Hatteras, but they're going to have the rain with this as well over there in the Outer Banks of North Carolina. The coastal flood and the wind could be, about the worst it is, going to be anywhere there with this low developing. I know it's interesting seeing the gradient. We may get a little bit more rain like St. John's Flagler, Eastern Duval, Eastern Nassau than what this is showing. Wouldn't be surprised, to be quite honest. Honestly, even in South Central Georgia, triple always showing with the frontal boundary coming down on that Thursday, maybe a little bit more rain than we're seeing here as well. So have to be watching out for that. We have to watch out for fog, some spots, further over. I know we're watching out for that potential here in some of the different counties. So just be kind of mindful of that here. Whenever, have that fog around, you just got to be very, very careful, obviously, as we're looking at things, to slow down and give yourself extra time to reach your destination. Make sure your vehicle is as visible as possible to other vehicles by using your low beam headlights, and leave plenty of room between you and the vehicle in front of you here. So now a little bit lighter topic, college football. I know we talked about the NFL a lot with Jacksonville, one of their biggest wins in years, first 4-1 record since 2007. The first Monday Night Football win on national ABC on an actual Monday night since 1999. But again, that's kind of crazy to think about. But you see Miami here, ACC champions. The college football playoff is what I'm predicting right now. They had that win over the Seminoles. I know it was 28-3 at one point. FSU did a good job fighting back, but can't put them even in the consideration right now for the playoff. That they're gonna have to win out and probably hope for some help. Hope somehow they get an ACC title game and win that. I just don't see it, quite honestly, but we'll see. We'll see what happens. I have a feeling, I could be wrong. Hope I'm wrong. I have a feeling FSU is gonna lose based on how they played it. If they play like the team that was down by 25 and leading up to that point, then they might lose quite a few more games. Pittsburgh look a lot better with their new quarterback in there for the Panthers. Then after that, FSU, their schedule here is still one that's going to be pretty tough. As we're looking and as we're tracking things here in college football for the Seminoles. I know, even Florida late in the year, they're looking a lot better now. DJ Lagway really playing well. They're just offensive line there, really getting things going. Not that they would be a playoff team. If they went out, I guess you'd really have to, again, I've talked about this before, Florida can just all of a sudden turn it on. They would be in consideration if they won, ran the table and won the rest of the game. I don't think that's going to happen, but it's not impossible. That was really impressive there. I know Texas really struggling, but then FSU going out to Stanford, it's a big team FSU beats, but a very odd time adjustment. That's tricky with the body clock coming to play at 10:30. Then Wake should be when you win, but Jake Dickert there from Wake Forest, Winston-Salem. They're that new coach that came in from the Pacific Northwest. I know he's a coach there that is somebody that, people thought pretty well of. So Knowles can't let up in that one. And at Clemson, Dabo's playing a lot better now. His team is with Cade Klubnik, two-time ACC champion quarterback. That's a road trip there, and, that's going to be really tough, I think. They beat North Carolina and Bill Belichick on Saturday handily, and they're having struggles, North Carolina. But then FSU's hosted Virginia Tech. They were doing a little bit better with an interim coach, and then at NC State. That's always a tough game here, a Friday night type of game for the Noles. And at Florida's playing a lot better, in terms of just with their lines. Their line play was really impressive. Their offensive and defensive lines against the Texas Longhorns. This could be an uphill battle for FSU. If they play as good as they did against Alabama, they could win all of those. If they play as bad as they did at the beginning of that Miami game, and keep in mind Virginia's actually a ranked team as well, so it's not quite as bad as I'm making out to be. If Miami and Virginia are actually as good as we think they are, but if they're not, FSU could lose against Pitt. They could lose out west against Stanford. Lose out, on that road against Clemson. Lose there at NC State. Lose at Florida. That gives you 2 wins, I think it is. Virginia Tech and Wake Forest, if I'm, looking at this right. And that only gets FSU there, to 5 wins and not in a bowl game. And you gotta wonder if FSU goes 5-7. Not that they will, because they did beat Alabama. They said how capable they were of beating Alabama. You see how good Alabama is based on my rankings here. I kind of think it was a fluke, but if it wasn't a fluke, and that quarterback is real good for Alabama, if FSU can, get the job done, win 8-9 games, they'll be okay, and we'll be looking ahead, with positive thoughts probably to next year in 2026. But if FSU, only gets to 5 or 6 wins, barely getting into a bowl or not getting into a bowl, you got to think about, sadly, Mike Norvell's done everything, the right way over the years, trying really hard. Not his fault that FSU got left out of the playoff. He tried really hard. Win 13 and win all your games. He went 13-0. The Noles won 13 games there that year and didn't lose any. And they were told they weren't good enough to play for a championship. So, but it's got to be heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking for the fans, but for him, for those players, it's hard to see, come back from that in that year, and then obviously only two got 12 games last year because of all that, and just the weight of that. And now I gotta wonder if he can't win the rest of these games here, or most of them. Sadly, he may be in a spot here where he ends up going to a different school like Arkansas or something like that. The Razorbacks have that open in there in Northwest Arkansas, Fayetteville, for instance, and he might be interested in that. He played at Central Arkansas, and both sides may agree to mutually part ways at that point, you would think. And if FSU only wins, total 5 or 6 games this season, and then you gotta wonder if Jimbo Fisher maybe is interested in coming back. I know it's a very tricky thing with that. But we'll just have to kind of wait and see with all that, down the road. Coaching speculation potentially. But if, you want to just win out of the FSU, be on the edge of the playoffs or get in, obviously be the best thing. You put all that to rest because, even if it is, Coach Fisher coming back there for 2026, you still are starting a lot of things over again. And it's a rebuild kind of versus, building up and getting close to being a playoff team again, so it's a tricky thing, hoping Coach Norvell can get the job done. Gotta win at Saturday's game there, that noon kickoff on ESPN. Gotta get that done. I think that's a Dave Paskin, Dusty Dvorak call there. As you see here, the Ohio State number 2, Julian Sayin doing a great job. I know a lot of folks Ohio State won. They did win the title last year. Miami there, I have them, as number 1. It's weird because I think they have the best resume. The way they put it at the end of that game gave me pause. I almost moved them down to 2, but going into Tallahassee, getting the win, I kept them at 1 for now. Ohio State, though, gets the job done in the subsequent weeks here with their big games ahead. They'll probably go to 1 because Miami's already played the toughest part of their schedule, really. So it's a tricky thing. If Ohio State goes to Illinois and wins big, maybe I move them up then. They play Penn State, usually always struggling, but then, Michigan, they went out. Their schedule is probably tougher there enough to move them to 1 in my assessment, like everybody else's assessment. Ohio State lost 2 games last year, got in though and won the title, so, it doesn't even have to be somebody that goes undefeated or only has 1 loss, but you see Oregon there. I'm talking about winning the title, but Oregon there, they're number 3, and then that Penn State win lost some luster up there. Penn State lost, in a bizarre game out there in Pasadena, California there, the Rose Bowl Stadium. But then as you see here, Texas Tech have them really high compared to folks. The Big 12 champ, the Red Raiders, they're doing really well. Undefeated Indiana, if they beat Oregon, they jump way high here in these rankings, at least 3, if not even higher, I would think. And then based on my assessment of things, and then and even the national rankings, I think they're 7 in the AP. They would go way high if they want to get Oregon and Eugene. Fernando Mendoza and the squad there, and you see Texas A&M. They're the SEC champ in my assessment. They beat Notre Dame already. That was so impressive in South Bend. Incredible win there, but I think Notre Dame's still really good. They, lost to Miami, and A&M had very close games with a new quarterback. No less. If Notre Dame wins out, they probably find a way into the playoff. I think even with a kind of a weaker schedule, they beat Boise State. It's one of their tougher games left. Back there last Saturday, they have USC coming up still, which will be a game that will be interesting though for the Fighting Irish. And then you see here Oklahoma, John Mateer. We'll see if he plays against Texas in that big rivalry on Saturday. You know, depending on how he plays after injury, that could determine, you know, they may go way higher if they win all out, you know, there and, you know, do it with a healthier quarterback. But, you know, then Alabama there, they were really impressive against Vanderbilt, really impressive against Georgia. Now that FSU lost, you really have to give Alabama a lot of credit now. I know it's weird, you know, in a way, but because you don't have the head-to-head really, I don't factor that in anymore because, you know, if the teams were equal, you use the head-to-head. Now it looks like with Alabama's play, they're not really equal. It looks like it was more of a fluke. Unless something really changes here, Alabama's ahead of FSU by a good bit then. And then you have Georgia Tech, they're number 10. Iowa State lost at Cincinnati, but I'm still keeping them in despite a lot of folks moving way out. I mean, you know, I have 4 SEC teams in, which is a lot, but some assessments have it more like 6 out of the 12 being from one conference in the playoff. And that's kind of the thought process. People are kind of, you know, wondering how that might be a little bit, you know, disappointing. Not a lot disappointing to other conferences. It didn't really happen last year, but a lot of years you would have that more the way things are going with certain number of losses being ahead. You know, even if they lost more, being ahead of teams with lesser losses from a different conference. So it's a tricky thing with that. You know, the strength of schedule would just, you know, because of all the losses in the SEC by teams, they're like a bunch of 3-loss teams, I think it was last year. That's why it wasn't as many as it would normally be. But a lot of times, if certain teams don't beat other teams, it could be as many as like 6 from one conference, which is really, a lot of folks don't want to see that. Some folks do, of course, you're in SEC territory, but of course, I'm a Seminole fan, graduated from FSU, so did also online graduate from Mississippi State as well. That's SEC. They've only lost 2 games now. Yeah, they lost to Tennessee and they lost to, of course, I didn't go on the games or any of the games there like I did for FSU. But, yeah, so Mississippi State there, though. You know, the SEC, I do have a little bit of a tie there, I guess, in that regard. But, you know, all those FSU games over the years when FSU was winning that title there, 2013, you know, that season after 2014, all those close games. What a great game that was against Notre Dame that went down to the wire. That's probably my favorite game I went to. I saw FSU lose, closed my eyes. There was a penalty, and then FSU ended up winning there after, you know, right there in the game. You know, they had next play to Notre Dame, and they didn't get it in there after the penalty took touchdown away. That looked like it had, you know, got FSU there, you know, to unfortunately, you know, lose, but it didn't. They got the job done. Somehow FSU won every single football game I went to there at Doak Campbell Stadium during my time there, which is remarkable. I still can't believe that happened like that, but, you know, they're at 2012 to 2016 time frame, but, you know, all of them I went to. I didn't go to the Florida 2012 one, for instance. So, as you see, USF, they're going to have a tough test at North Texas there, and it didn't Texas there Friday night. That's a huge, you know, game there in that conference. Almost called it the Big East, but no, it's the American Conference there. And North Texas never in America or the Big East, but they're in the American, but USF, which is, you know, what you have here as they're looking. And then you have Georgia, Missouri, BYU. Those are the first few out. Missouri hadn't lost. You know, if they beat Alabama there, they're hosting them Saturday, then they're going to go way up. BYU's undefeated. Notre Dame's lost 2, though, but they were really good teams, really close games with a new quarterback. Virginia, they had that one loss, you know, to NC State early, but they had the FSU win. They won at Louisville in overtime on Saturday. LSU, Tennessee, the last 2 there in that college football playoff there assessment of things. You know, based on my rankings, I have LSU, Tennessee lower. Just not really sure, you know, especially, you know, you see LSU, they went there to Ole Miss, and LSU already had struggles against Florida. They, you know, had struggles even against Louisiana Tech to a lesser degree earlier on in their season. I think it was Tennessee. They almost lost to Mississippi State. Why Texas A&M beat them handily there, you know, like going away later in the game at least. So let's kind of look at things. I know Texas A&M and Florida are playing this week there as we're looking and as we're tracking things. And the Gators there, they're headed out to, I believe it is College Station. Let me double check that. You know, I mean, yeah, it is College Station on Saturday night there. I was wondering if it was a home game for Florida, but it was not. It's not. It's a away game Saturday at 7 there in College Station. As the season goes on, you know, so much keeps happening. You kind of have to just double check, see, I know where things stand. But yeah, that's a road game for Florida at A&M on Texas A&M on Saturday night. tough environment for the Gators. It'll be tough, but not impossible based on how they play against Texas. I would think Texas A&M probably win that, but you never know. We're not 100% sure. We think because of A&M's great win at Notre Dame that they're really good, but we'll see because Florida has a lot of talent, even though they already lost 3 games. As you see here, 30% chance of rain on that Wednesday. And now as we get back to the forecast graphic here and that planning look at things, you see we're watching a front and coastal low. That the low develops. As we look, I have 50 for Thursday and Friday. East areas maybe a little bit higher. Northern areas with the front maybe a little higher. But we'll just have to kind of wait and see. Some models are going pretty high. Some forecasts and models here, that rainfall forecast from Weather Prediction Center is a little bit lower on things. So we'll see. Today's going to be a little more interesting even than what it would kind of show here. But kind of splitting the difference. You see that the cool air finally comes in, in terms of more widespread. We had some cooler up points, but this is more, not this what some folks call false fall. It's the actual more fall air. A little bit more widespread coming in with those upper 50s, overall, for that low, kind of splitting the difference there. Sunday through Tuesday, but some areas could have even more cool air than that. Rural areas, you guys could be getting into those mid-50s there, something like that. So good bit below average as we're looking ahead with some of those areas there. The highs, low 80s there. Started to inch back up a little, but very low rain chances. Just keeping it as a silent, like 5%. Really unlikely to really see much precip, but keeping it in there for now in case things change. You see on that Monday, that's Columbus Day there. So some folks have it off, some don't. But you see there 59 degrees on that Monday. And that'll be something that would be pretty nice to be waking up to there, especially if you're not having to get out and get out the door and go to work. But, that's a pretty nice forecast. Or even if you do, that's not terrible. I mean, you're probably getting up earlier when it's actually a little bit more, almost jacket weather, like jacket weather. It depends. Some people don't think it is at that number. But, some folks it probably would be. I mean, as you're tracking things here in toward the weather center. I mean, it will warm up though. You have to take that off, and it will not be jacket weather by the afternoon, even if there's less humidity around. So that's kind of the storyline there. I know there's quite a bit of rain in the northeast right now. Let me see that. I know it is really late, but wrap it on up. But you see here, as you're watching live, it is, as I see the clock here, it is 3:01 a.m. But, you see Pennsylvania there. Quite a bit of rain up there. Nothing severe with this, but in New York State, we see kind of a bit of rain up there. Not anything too crazy in that area. As we track things, but kind of intriguing there. You see a frontal boundary action, as we're looking with the wind directions and the like here. Always interesting to kind of get an idea on all of that here as we're giving you guys the very latest. So just important to kind of be mindful here of what's happening there in the meteorological picture, obviously, as we're keeping you guys up to date. I know they had that rain delay in Michigan on that Tuesday with that baseball game. It wasn't a bunch of rain, but it's not like you need lightning to have a delay in baseball. And Detroit had a delay, and then they ended up losing to the Seattle Mariners. And FSU guy there, a big player for them years ago, Cal Raleigh. Their one went away from the next round, the ALCS, which could be against Toronto, but New York did win. The Yankees did win on that Tuesday to cut that down to 2-1 there in the series. So that's going to do it for now. Thanks so much for tuning in, trusting me. Have a great night. We're going to keep watching things. Let me see if there are any updates, because sometimes they update these during the night. The alerts for the coast. Let's see here. Have they changed this yet? The Weather Service in Jax? Not yet, but we're going to get a coastal flood watch pretty soon. We have the advisory, but we'll probably get a coastal flood watch here pretty soon. I'll have to be alert for that. The winds and the coastal low, though. When we start to see the threat become more magnified again, and then the front coming in. We'll watch to see if we get, we may get a rogue severe warning here coming up on Thursday, or even, maybe a flash flood warning early Friday if things go a little bit worse than we're thinking. Well, the next one update late Thursday, let's need to pop back in earlier, though. Look how warm it is down North Cape Canaveral, down there. Some of the areas just south around 80 there at the Patrick Air Force Base. I know it's something when you're looking at that. I know we had almost this exact time yesterday, right before 3 a.m. It's a great view of a rocket launch here from our area. Should have had it on in the show, actually. Could have showed that to go off. I mean, it's just, it wasn't a really close-up view of it, but it was something there that was pretty nice to see the orange in the sky there, with a rocket lifting on off there from the Space Coast. I hope you guys have a great night. Let me see if there are any questions or comments for those staying up late watching here live. We do these late at night so we can get the latest data in here. That's the way we're doing them right now, based on, this is right at this point in time anyway. It's the best way to do them, I think. These updates here, of course, we're just a bit weather. Sometimes it's different, but this way we get the more, up-to-date data in here for you guys to keep you guys up to date on everything. So just going through here to see if there's any questions or comments. It's always important to kind of keep tabs on all that here. Just make sure we don't have anything. Make sure I'm not missing anything, obviously, in toward the Weather Center. I'm just, trying to look at that here live. Sometimes I have to make sure I'm going to the right screen. So we have so many different things. Sometimes I have to keep up here on the screen as we're keeping you guys up to date, obviously, with these type of scenarios, just making sure you guys are up to date. Don't see anything here. You see all the platforms are on now. Facebook there, KC Cloud Every X, Cloud Weather, Twitter, at Cloud Caster. It's also called the X platform there at Cloud KC, and then you have YouTube at Cloud Weather, Twitch Cloud Weather, and then cloudweather.com. You have the interactive radar on there as well. Have a great night, everybody. Go Noles. I know didn't get a job done there. As we're looking, back Saturday, and the Jags, what a great job they did. Go Jaguars there. Of course, basketball season coming up, men's and women's for the Noles there. Fall ball and baseball there as well. So some different things to look forward to, but football's not done yet. We'll see what Tommy Castellanos and the team can do on Saturday against Pitt. You went out, same for Florida at this point. I mean, they have 3 losses. Florida State has 2. Obviously, they both won't win out because they played each other last game of the regular season. But, one of the 2 teams did somehow win out. They probably have a pretty good case for the college football playoff. I don't think it's going to happen for either one. But, in the very rare scenario that one of those did win out, then, either one of those probably have a good case for it. Even if it's the Gators, I'd probably be making no case for it if they went out. And a lot of folks would be too. Because that'd be really impressive to get all those wins there. Stack them at the end of the year like that. As we're looking and as we're tracking things. But their schedule was very tough. I mean, going to Texas A&M this week. Mississippi State next week. They're not as tough, but still pretty tough. Georgia and Jacksonville. They're going to be going to Ole Miss later on in the year. Tennessee's a late November game. It's before the FSU game. I mean, it's in Gainesville, but still. I know FSU has to go up to NC State. Both of those are kind of tough. I feel like there'll probably be a lot more losses for both. But Florida, quite honestly, what happened there on Saturday, it was not looking like this for the first few weeks with FSU beating Alabama. But, the Texas game for Florida might have been a fluke too. But, it looked kind of as if maybe Florida had more talent. Maybe FSU coaching might have been a little bit better in utilization of the talent. But, just in terms of the overall talent, recruiting rankings, sometimes this can back that up. But, it's something where Florida maybe had more talent, but FSU had better coaching. But we'll just have to kind of wait and see in the weeks to come. That's the storyline here, and FSU is a big use of big user of the portal. So that's important as well. Such a big, thing they used there to build that team in 2023 that went, undefeated, and then they got left out of the playoff, and it's hard to come back from that. There, obviously, still there's discussions there, on those, I guess, boards there on the internet about, FSU one day switch conferences, the Big Ten or something. We'll see about that. It's hard to say, but that's something that, some folks think, maybe the best option for FSU as we look ahead in the timeline. But, that just in terms of revenue and the like. But we shall see. Have a great night.